So hi everyone. In my third video today, I wanted to talk about what reality is. So in one hand, you could say that reality is in a sense the totality of all that is real or exists within a given system, as opposed to what is imaginary. But then this brings up the question, what's our imagination and does it play an integral part in creating our reality? So yes, in my opinion. So if you consider Bashar, who's channeled by Daryl Anger, he talks about our reality being a physical dream in a sense, originating from us and our consciousness in order to have certain experiences to help us to get to know ourselves. Ourselves being a multidimensional being of light that exists outside of reality and is infinite and omnipresent. So you have the human us, the higher mind, the higher self, our oversoul, and even levels above that going all the way to source. And what we are really depends on your perspective or vantage point. If you see physical reality as a kind of play that we're taking part in, then you could extend this idea to us in truth walking around our own consciousness, in the idea that we create our own reality in every moment in cooperation with our higher dimensional aspects, as well as the human collective. In other words, consciousness comes first and thoughts comes first as well. And indeed, our own thoughts, beliefs and imagination underpin the reality that we experience. In my opinion, that's a really positive, expansive perspective, because the implication is, of course, that we can in fact create our own reality, and therefore we're not at the whim of external objective realities, which in truth don't really exist. But our reality is perceived through our senses in order to give us a very specific perspective of being separate and limited in comparison to other larger multidimensional selves. And that enables experiences and understandings of ourselves that couldn't be obtained if we remained aware of our true expansive multidimensional and infinite nature. So how can we navigate our lives more consciously through our senses when they present us with such a specific perspective? I've invited a very, very special guest, Brian Oxley, who's a spiritualist medium who's been working publicly for 14 years to discuss the propaganda of the senses and how we can begin to live more consciously through certain understandings of what reality is and who we truly are. So hello, Brian.
Hello, James. It's great to be with you, and congratulations on the channel.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, I've been, one of the things that I really wanted to achieve through this channel was just covering some of the really, really big topics. Obviously, this being one of the really, really major ones. And some of the thoughts that were going around my head over the last few years is, everything that we interact with this universe really, truly is through our senses, nothing else. So in my mind, consciousness really does come first before anything else. And yet we live in a world where I guess we're shifting now, but certainly for a long, long time, there's been this idea of an objective external reality, that we're kind of, I don't know, held prisoner by to a degree. That's perhaps a bit strong, but I wanted to get your opinion on the senses and the messages that we get from them, the propaganda of the senses that we get through our media and so on.
That's right. I think that I think your introduction was spot on. And I mean, to my mind, my belief is that, as you were saying quite rightly, that obviously our senses are created so that we receive a particular view of the world. And obviously that helps us navigate this physical reality very well indeed. I mean, as we know, our hearing, our eyes, our vision, our taste, they can be extremely sensitive. I mean, judging distances, hearing particular sounds, particular frequencies. And so, they enable us day to day to live our physical lives. But as we know, there's a balance here to be struck, and that is between our physical reality and, to my mind, the other part of that weighing scale, if you like, is our link to the spirit world. And it would be my contention that We're always linked to the spirit world. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we have to focus entirely on one or entirely on the other, but it means that we need to give both energy and time. Now, obviously, our senses help us navigate the physical reality, as we say, but then we need to have a technique to overcome our sense of limit that our physical senses give us, in order to be able to focus on our spiritual side as well. I mean, the senses make it very clear to us that we're individual, that our physicality, or ourselves with a capital S, if you like, ends at where our skin is. The sounds we hear are in a particular range, but we know that certain animals, like dogs, for example, can hear well beyond that range if they're given the opportunity to do so. So, what I think we're moving towards, and I think this was covered in your intro, really, is that yes, we have the physical senses, but also we can learn and train ourselves to almost see, in inverted commas, beyond them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And I think the way that we do that is that we become, we're aware of our senses, as we're in every moment, every waking moment, we're aware of them. But simply acknowledging and having the knowledge and the belief that there is something beyond them, that there's a greater world, if you like, to put it in simpler terms, then that gives us then the opportunity to investigate this.
Yeah, I think sorry.
No, I was just going to say, just to finish the point, I was just going to say that I think the key to this is becoming the observer.
Yeah, yeah. I want to sort of latch on to the point that you made, that we need to kind of believe that our senses are more than the traditional ones that we use in our waking day, because we are, if we are creator beings, as so many channelers and other wisdom says, then our belief systems are absolutely core to that. So if we believe that we only perceive through our 5 waking senses, then that's the experience we'll have. But on the other hand, if we can sort of feel into the understanding that we are the multidimensional infinite beings, really, we are one, but we are also our individual selves and everything in between, and it is just a matter of perspective and frequency. If we can, then we start to be able to unlock doors within ourselves and explore that, and then through processes like meditation, or just sitting in silence and in peace, and through self-reflection and becoming more conscious in how we live our lives, then slowly but surely we can expand our consciousness into these different frequencies, slightly raised frequencies, and begin to experience things outside of our day-to-day system, as it were.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I would say to you that, you know, throughout history, there has been hints at this, as that those, you know, philosophers and seers and wise people, famous phrase, the unexamined life is not worth living. Now, I know that was in a Madonna song, but I think she found that elsewhere. But the point about that is that, you know, when you do sit and you just simply contemplate, it tends to put the senses, I think, on autopilot in a way. They're working just as ever, but it gives you a chance to go within, not even to the point of perhaps meditation, just sitting perhaps with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and just being with yourself. And it's very interesting how, when I talk to people about their spiritual experiences, or if somebody sits with me to develop and so on, that you suddenly sense the change in the room. There's a shift in the energy that is around us. And all we've done is simply move our perspective.
Yeah.
Away from an active engagement with our senses to, yeah, they're running, okay, let them be there doing their thing. I just want, you know, we just want to go inside for a moment and just sit. It's like daydreaming in a sense. When we're daydreaming, we're not noticing the passage of time. We don't even hear what's going on around us. Sometimes we're not conscious.
Yeah.
And so that's when then spirit can draw close to us, to my mind. And this is what happens I think when the room goes very still, people feel cool. You know, it's a physical change brought about by the closeness of that energy. But there's just one other thing that I would say here, that, you know, the universe is seeking to teach us in every moment, the universal energy, God, spirit, however you perceive it. And, you know, something as simple as thinking of someone and they phone you, or you see them walking down the street in the next hour or something, or you get a letter from them, you know, something straightforward, or a text or an email, I suppose I should say, or WhatsApp message. But the truth is that there's no such thing as coincidence. We call them synchronicities, which shows you how the physical reality that we're aware of and the greater world reality are dovetailing in together.
Mm.
And now you can just say to yourself, oh, well, that's a coincidence. But when you think of the organization behind those two worlds coming together, so that you have the thought and then you see the person, you know, an hour later, I mean, there is a colossal amount going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Now, as I say, if we just sort of take it as, oh, well, oh, how funny, you know, then that's going to be how we perceive it. But if we just, in our moments of daydreaming or sitting quietly, if we just think about that for a minute, that
Mm.
alone opens up a whole array of understandings and thoughts, which perhaps just sort of dismissing it as, oh, that's a coincidence, wouldn't give you. It
Yeah.
wouldn't give you. So you're absolutely right, I think, when you say that this notion of being aware of our own consciousness and what is being shown to us
Mm.
is also
And
very important.
yeah, and also maybe sort of examining our own definitions, because those our human definitions have been built up over millennia on many different ideologies that we've evolved throughout the ages, and I think it's just about if we are these creator beings, and you know, our reality is created in every given moment through ourselves, our belief systems, in working with the human collective and our higher self, then you know, we can achieve all kinds of things. And I think just really looking at those definitions, exploring, and not really looking externally to say, well, that's right and that's wrong, but more internally and saying, well, what's right for me? How do I feel about this particular idea? Do I want to act upon it to make it more integrated in my reality? Do I want to come from this place rather than that place? I think that's the key thing, because we're all one, and yet we're individuals, and we're all on our own exploration, our own path.
Oh,
So I think it's so important to really get in touch with our own true nature, and live from that perspective. Of course, I'm not saying we can't agree with other people's ideas,
yeah.
and resonate with them. I think if one does, then of course our realities in a sense can come closer together. In other words, we attract those into our lives that resonate on a similar vibration as ourselves.
I think that's right, and also I think the point you make there about the way that we develop, you know, if there is an understanding in spiritualist thinking of the mirror principle, you know, that what we are being shown every day is something that we need to notice. Now, we might notice a conflict perhaps taking place somewhere in the world on the TV news. Now, we may just say to ourselves, oh, that's going on in those countries or whatever. And if we leave it at that, fine, there's no judgment with that. But if we just think for a moment and take the view that, well, hang on, if everything I'm being shown is a reflection, well, then perhaps it's worth, in those moments when we're having our cup of tea and sitting quietly for 10 minutes or daydreaming, to think, well, perhaps is there a conflict within me? Am I dealing with some sort of conflict?
Yeah.
And it's just that sense of just taking a step back almost, I would say, to be the observer, and to think through what it is that is being shown. I think sometimes what you often find, I mean, when I do demonstrations of mediumship or work in do a divine service in a church, you know, we always have a period of demonstrating mediumship, obviously. And, you know, it often crops up that somebody is so busy, so many responsibilities, either caring for people or people just have to rely on them or whatever it is. But where does the individual fit in all that? Where does the person, where does the spirit that's incarnated to learn, where do they fit in? And I think when you begin to take that sort of view, once you become aware of things, then it's easier to take action around them.
Mm.
It's we're not aware always, that things can get because we just get into the habit of doing,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's fine too. There's no condemnation or judgment here, but I I I personally believe that there's more to our lives than going about our daily business.
mm, mm,
And I think this is shown over and over again by both, the ancient writings that we have access to, channeled works, as you mentioned in your introduction. And I think some of the information that comes forward about the notion that we are co-creators, particularly this idea that with the universal energy we can actually fashion our reality,
mm.
that what comes at us objectively, as you say, is not the end,
Yeah, yeah,
simply something to notice and then begin to think, well, what do I want in life?
I
Because
think,
our sense
yeah,
would tell us that this is it. What you see is what you get, and that is true. But also, it's my belief, firm belief, that by thinking things through, you can begin to shift that reality.
yeah, yeah. I think also, like, that there's really a lot of power in the idea that whatever happens in our external world, I mean, you know what it's like the last sort of few years with the pandemic and all these things, the war at the moment. There's so much stuff out there that's being thrown at us through media, different
Mm,
media. It's important, it would be very easy to kind of just sit there and kind of tune into the fear that generates, and exist on that vibration. Um, but I think there's an opportunity being presented to us to, in a sense, examine ourselves through these events on a global stage. And as you're saying, and really look at, well, is there a part of this that is I am embodying in my personal life? And more to the point, to look at these external situations for the positive lesson that is being offered. So,
uh,
so to change our relationship with all the information that we get through our senses day to day, through media, through films,
mm,
through our day-to-day interactions with others, and just look at the possible, change, reframe things so that we look at, well, okay, this experience with this person or this program on TV is generating this response in me, or this reaction. What does that offer me in terms of service, in terms of how I might be able to expand my consciousness awareness, integrate certain themes, and move, rather from reacting to external things, into a state of choosing how one responds to them moving
yeah,
forward.
absolutely right. And I think that, what people call knee-jerk reactions, they can sometimes be okay, but sometimes a bit of consideration before we react in a particular way is very important. But I think the important point there that you've made is that it's the information that is coming at us and that we're receiving, if you like. And one of the key areas that I think is so important to notice is that when we meditate, of course, we essentially close our senses down. We close our eyes. Some people like to meditate with music. Personally, I like to just sit quietly, but it's each person's choice. Um, but what we're doing is we're saying to our senses in a way for sort of 10, 20 minutes, whatever, okay, take a break now. And then from within, from that connection that I strongly believe we have, back to the spirit world, from that connection, we can then begin to receive other information from what I've been describing in our chat as the greater world. So beyond our senses, beyond what we can see, beyond what we can hear, but what we may spiritually feel, spiritually see, spiritually hear, and linking our energy as part of, we are we are light in a greater light. And when we sort of just ask our senses to pause for a few minutes and we link into that greater light, we become part of it. We
Yeah.
can't not be, in my mind. And therefore, as we do this, then that opens us up to all kinds of opportunities to receive inspired thought, perhaps to see things, maybe to receive wisdom from ancient seers. All kinds of different opportunities open up to us. Some people, understandably, because it's not always easy to meditate by yourself. I find from talking to people, but just that sitting and just letting everything just be, makes a huge amount of difference.
Yeah.
Sort of recenters you in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already started going into the topic, but the last bit of this talk I wanted to go through today was just kind of the actual things we can do to help us move into a more sort of conscious way of living. So as you say, sitting and just being or meditating, becoming aware, increasing our awareness in terms of what's happening for us in any given moment, perhaps stopping also to think so much or live so much in the perceived past or perceived future, because of course there's the idea that all is now, and the past and the future appear linear to us, but that is part of the illusion to allow us to have this unique experience that we have as human beings.
Yeah, and it's just like we talk about the propaganda of the senses, we can also talk about the corkscrew of time.
Yes.
We perceive time as a straight arrow, don't we, going forward, when in the reality it's not more complicated, but it's just a different way of seeing it. But that's perhaps a talk for another time. The truth is that if we do take the time, and I think for your viewers and listeners, one thing that I would suggest, which I often say to people when they ask me about what's the best way to meditate, I will often say to them, we have thousands of thoughts every day. Our decision to meditate does not arbitrarily stop those thoughts. So you will receive thoughts about, our daily lives, day-to-day things that are even, do we need to buy some food for dinner or something of that sort. The key, though, is to notice that those thoughts are coming in, and then just let them pass by. It's a bit like, I heard this the other day, and I can't just recall where now, but it was, I thought how true this was. It's like when a motor car goes by us, when we're walking along the road. We don't sort of stop and think, I wonder where that car's going. I wonder when that car was manufactured. I wonder who's sitting in that car. We don't do that. We just think, oh, a car's gone by. And that is the way to think about something that comes in. And in time and with practice, and it doesn't take a lot of practice really, just sitting quietly, then the mind will quiet of its own accord. It will begin to become calmer. And that is when it is calm, that then the greater world can then give us, can impress upon us ideas, thoughts, and things of thought. But certainly the notion of how do you live with perhaps greater clarity might be a way to put it, by actually just taking time out to just think and review and just see what comes to us.
Yeah, and actually you've brought up an interesting thing that popped into my mind just now. I think, the things that happen across the road or, not very close to us, it's very easy for us to just to watch those and perhaps be less judgmental towards them, and they would affect our own frequency less. But of course, if things happen to us in our lives that we have a vested interest in, that perhaps touch on certain triggers that we may have accumulated through life, perhaps to do, for example, with issues with personal relationships, family and whatnot, then we have a much there's an emotional tie to that, and those are the things that can really offer us valuable lessons, because those are the ones that we really get pulled into, and we're more likely to react to rather than to just observe. So I believe it's really trying to look at those experiences that happen to us that are very close to us, that do engender some form of reaction or response. Those are the things to look on as lessons being offered, and ways to really, really get to know ourselves in a whole deeper level.
Absolutely. And the thing I think there that you've sort of touched upon is the way that we don't, as human beings, we don't just rely on instinct. Yes, we do to some extent, of course we do, the old flight and fight response, I think it's called. But we have the ability, through the way our brains are constructed, to reason, to think about how things are and what that means for us, not just in a kind of it's in front of my face kind of way, but in a more abstract, more more contextual way, to give us a perspective. And I think that when we sit quietly and we are engaged in this sort of activity, this is when, to my mind, inspired thought can come through. And those feelings when the penny drops and you suddenly think, oh, that's the answer. Those kinds of things happen when we take a few minutes to think, when we use our reason and when we use our understanding of the world, and also allow other understandings to draw close to us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
So I know we've touched upon a great deal of things here, but I suppose if I try to sort of sum it up for the listeners, I think the key things that we can do is perhaps just explore some of the material that's out there that more recently talk about the ideas that we're not really just living in a linear construct of time and space, but we are so much more, and we create the illusion of that in order to have the experience. The idea that consciousness is at the root of all, and as we've been talking about today, the idea of observation, inner reflection, meditation, becoming more conscious in how we live our lives day to day, therefore embodying who we truly are. And I guess also you could say, by living more consciously like that, we are going to be, in whatever way that may be, because of course it's individual for everybody, but we will be probably much more aligned to the themes that our higher dimensional aspects wish to explore. I mean, I'm sure everyone out there is aware of the Bashar's idea of follow your passion to the greatest degree that you can, as far as you can take it, until you can't take it any further, without any expectations. The way that he kind of portrays the sort of model of the best way to live in reality. So it's about embodying all of that, really getting to know ourselves, and then becoming a lot more conscious in every given moment, checking in with ourselves throughout the day as well. Is there anything else that, Brian, that you think the viewers could do in terms of getting to that goal of a more conscious way of living?
Well, the three key things, and you've sort of touched on these anyway, I think, is certainly becoming the observer, looking at events that happen to us, or that we observe, or that we look at, but look at them in a more conscious way, as you say. Begin to cultivate the understanding that we are more than our senses tell us. That is the key thing as well. And the other thing is as you say, is with the meditation. I mean, some people think, oh, I've got to sit still for an hour and all this, and it isn't really like that. I mean, you can take as long as you want, really. I mean, you can meditate on a train if you wish to. I used to do it actually at one time. But what I'm saying is that it's just this. It's the mindfulness and the understanding. The concept really is very simple, that there is more than we see, hear, touch, feel, and taste. Once we get that understanding, as we would understand it, you then go beyond that, and then that opens up a whole new world. But there's one thing I do want to just say, is that sometimes people will feel that their circumstances are such that they can't do this kind of thing, or it isn't for them for some way. And I understand that reasoning. But I would suggest that it might be helpful for people just to start in a small way, and just to notice, even if it's just to notice for 5 minutes a day. You know, a book that you and I have discussed about, you know, the Course in Miracles. You know, a lot of that, they are daily lessons. Daily. You don't learn the whole thing in one go. It's daily, and that's often about observation. So it's a whole range of different things that we can do. It depends what each person is, but once I think this understanding of there is more than our senses are telling us, then that is the key that opens the door to a much greater understanding.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that today. What I am mindful of is I know we've discussed a lot of things coming from a lot of different materials. So I will make sure that I post links to the ones that we've discussed today in the comments section below. And you know, thank you again, Brian, so much for joining us today. And I'll also put your contact details in the comments section as well, because obviously I know that you do readings online and in person, don't you?
Yes, that's right. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And James, all the best. The information you're bringing forward is very, very important, and I think it's nice that it's done in this conversational, casual way, a chat between friends, because I think there's so much more can emerge from that. So I'm really pleased that you've got the channel up and running, and every success to you with it.
Oh, thank you very much. And with that, thank you to all my viewers, and see you next time.
Question.